It's my neighbor, and she's holding something in her hand. She broke in during the night, and who knows how long she stood there. You should lock your doors at night, she said.
Kill this What it is, guys? It's your boy Blastphamoushd, and today we are hooking up yet again. We're gonna watch top 15 true scary stories that will make you cringe. If you guys want to check out the original link, it's gonna be in the description down below. Lego! It cannot be that bad. But just in case it is, I'm gonna close my door. It makes me feel so much more safer.
All of the following stories are from the Ask Reddit post, "What's your creepiest real life story?" A link to this post is in the description below. Number 15. In a cold winter night in a remote village from Quebec, Canada, me and my two brothers were asleep. We were 1, 3, and 6 years old. In the middle of the night, someone entered our house without knocking, walked around, and was talking to himself. Our house is 2 miles from the village in a rural area. My father woke up, went to the living room, and there the guy was. He had a car accident 1 mile from our house with his buddy who instantly died, and his scalp fell in front of his face. He was drunk and his body was frozen. He was speaking to himself, "I'm gonna die." The fact that his face was partially frozen might have saved his life, preventing him from losing too much blood. My father took him to the hospital that was 25 kilometers from our house by car. He did survive. To this day, my father is still blessed the fact that we never woke up during that night with all the noise. Number 14. Last year, a guy came to my door at 9 o'clock at night. He knocked and I got my mom and she went out to see what was up. By the way, we live in a very rural area, so visits that late are extremely uncommon and strange. The guy talked to my mom about how he was opening a business, asked whether she liked American-made products, then handed her a Clorox container as a sample. He went back to his minivan and opened it to get a vacuum cleaner when my mom saw 5 other men sitting inside. She told me to run and get the police since we didn't have a landline. I couldn't find it, so I got my knife and stood around the corner. She threw the container outside and told them to get the hell off her property. They peeled out of the driveway and we never saw the car again. 2 months later, my mom found a single bearded guy putting filled garbage bags by the back door. She asked him what the hell he was doing and he responded by saying, "This is for your little girl." Again, she told him to get the hell out. Then we went through the bags. They were filled with garbage, dirty clothes, and empty tampon containers. Number 13. When I was a kid, I was always the last kid picked up by the bus driver to go to school. One day I was waiting for the bus by myself and a bus with no kids pulled up. The bus driver smiled and told me to hop on. I just had a bad feeling. I said, "Where are the other kids?" He said, "We will go get them now. Just get on." He got more and more pushy but didn't do anything crazy. I kept just saying no and he shrugged and left. The real bus pulled up a few minutes later. I went to school and my parents didn't know until I mentioned it that night. Looking back, they were pretty worried. I remember them scrambling to make a few phone calls. Number 12. It was very early morning or late at night, whatever you want to call it. Around 5 a.m., still dark, my dad and brother and I were in the car driving to the mosque. On the way there's a dimly lit road with a forest on both sides and a bend that makes it difficult to see. Bear in mind this isn't a residential area. There isn't even a sidewalk, and the nearest intersection is a good kilometer either way. So we're driving, we get to this bend, and just before it we see a figure sort of waving us down. They were dressed kinda odd, but I figured it was some sort of running outfit. I don't want to say it was glowing or reflective cause I don't fully remember, but it just made me assume that it was some sort of running outfit. Couldn't make out his face or anything about him other than his clothing. So he's waving us down dramatically. My dad slows down but doesn't really think anything of it. As we turn along the road we see a car like right freaking there. It was just out of view before the curve in the road, so we would have definitely hit it if my dad didn't slow down. Dad stops, quickly checks on the driver of the car to make sure he's okay, then doubles back for some reason, maybe to thank the guy on the road who warned us. He drove back quite a ways, no one on either side of the road. It was about 60 seconds from initially seeing the guy to turning around to where he was, so no time for him to really go anywhere. Number 11. I lived in a small college town and my apartment complex was walking distance from the bar downtown area. One weekday night I stepped out on my front porch to smoke a cigarette or two. I brought my textbook with me and sat down on the stairs while I smoked. A girl who I had never met but who lived one apartment over but down on the ground floor came home from downtown. She was by herself and you could tell from her walk that she had been drinking. She got in her apartment and barely closed the door before some guy who came out of nowhere knocked on her door. She opened it and I noticed he introduced himself, which was kinda weird because it was 2:30 a.m. Who comes to a strange girl's apartment at that time? so I decided to stay outside and pay attention. They ended up talking for over 10 minutes. She acknowledged how weird the situation was but didn't know how to end the conversation. He would do the creepiest things, like how he reached up and stroked her hair at least 3 times and would try and slowly inch his way closer to her and the door. I made a point of being loud with my textbook so he would know I was there, and he had disappeared as eerily as he had come. We called the cops, and days later they had the girl and me sit with a sketch artist. As soon as the sketch was made public, floods of calls came in. The guy turned out to be a serial who had followed lone girls home from bars and pretended to be a cab offering them rides. This girl got lucky just because she lived so close to the bar and he didn't have a chance to pull the cab routine. Number 10. Went camping with some friends on a hill a few kilometers out in the woods from one of the guys' houses. There's a few hiking / four-wheeling trails in the area that lead up to the hill, so it's known by the locals. It was about midnight. We had a fire going and was just sitting around having a good time. Then the guy sitting opposite of me yells, "Who are you?" I turn around and there's this man about 6 feet tall staring at us from the edge of the woods with a big rock in his hand. One guy knocked an arrow in the composite bow we had. The guy across from me grabbed the hatchet and I pulled a knife off my belt. We had no clue what we were doing, but the guy wouldn't say anything to us. He eventually just backed into the woods. No sleep was had that night and we kept a very large fire going. Number 9. I was in Minot, North Dakota with my old band. Our tour van blew a head gasket and we were stuck there for a few days. Everyone was tired on day 2, but I was wide awake. I walk for a bit and make it to some scummy bar. I'm obviously not from around there and no one is saying a word to me. After 2 beers I start to get a tad nauseous and dizzy. I put my head on my hand and try to let it pass, but it keeps getting worse. Suddenly a voice says, "You'll feel pain tonight." I jump and look up and a tall, roughly 40-year-old man is walking to the bathroom, turns back and glances at me. I call my friends and get the out of there. I slept for 12 to 13 hours and felt awful and loopy the next day. I was roofied. Number 8. This is the first of 2 instances. First, I was alone in the basement playing GTA 4 with my friends on my PC. It gets to about 1 a.m. and we're having a blast, shooting RPGs and throwing grenades willy-nilly. Then I hear a sound that doesn't really fit with GTA. I figure it's not coming from my headset, so I take it off. The sound that's being made is coming from an old music box that we have. The last time it was used was probably 10 years ago, and this thing is just full on blaring its song. I start chanting "no, no, 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 no" and book it upstairs, leaving my friend on Skype pretty confused. My mom and dad are coming down from their room. My dad is equipped with a baseball bat, and as you can imagine, it's hard to explain to him that it was not an intruder. My second instance was in the same basement. Now my basement has a main area, which most of our furnishings are. Then there's this unfinished part of the basement where I'm sure the spirits dwell, but I digress. Anyway, this time I'm playing GTA 4 again with the same friend. It's about 1 a.m. and we decide to call it a night. It's at that point that I hear,
"Man, dude. Okay, so I got these things, these speaker things, right? And right as he just got to the scary part, one of them went off. And when these things turn off by themselves due to non-use, they make this boo sound, dude. That sound went off, man, and they got this picture on the screen. Scared the literal out of me. I didn't jump, but my heart did, dude. That shit, oh my God. I felt that shit gorge with adrenaline. Oh my God. I was about to fight my camera.
"Da da da da," in a little girl's voice from the bowels of the unfinished part of the basement. Now it's pitch black around me except for my island of salvation at my computer. At this point I'm so done with the ghost that I say get fine, have the basement, and go upstairs and go to bed. There's a couple more instances of spooky ghosts, but not as scary as these 2. Number 7. I live in Sydney, Australia, and this was probably just over a year ago. I was driving with my girlfriend back to my home after going out for dinner at a friend's house, which is about 15 minutes away from my area called Watson's Bay. To get back to my place, you need to drive down into the valley near the harbor down a long winding main road that progressively takes you down to the water. It's about 1:30 or 2 a.m. and we're making our ways down the road and not really paying much attention. And she suddenly grabs my arm and gasps, which freaks me out already. As I'm looking around to see what the is going on, we approach the roundabout and there's a man in medical looking attire next to a woman in what looks like white pajamas with blood covering a lot of her clothing. Now obviously my balls drop and instincts kick in as I speed up. It's quite a small roundabout, so you need to either slow down enough to turn left or speed up and get the straight out of there. I go straight, and as we pass, the woman attempts to launch herself at my car as the man looks like he was trying to stop her. We get home about 3 or 4 minutes later and we're both shaken and basically scared. called the police to inform them of what we saw, and just got a call back the next morning explaining how a woman had somehow run away from a mental home and was attempting to commit suicide using sharp objects and running onto main roads. The man was one of the first workers who knew her on the scene, and apparently they managed to bring her back to where she lived. Heard nothing more after that. Number 6. We were partying at a usual party spot by the river, and some dude came out of the woods. He just kept saying weird shit like, "You gotta watch yourself down there. There's some really bad folks around here." When we asked who he was, he just said, "I'm nobody." We're all a little sketched out and basically told the guy to f*** off. A couple of days later, a girl went off the rope swing there and got really f***ed up. Someone put fish hooks all over the bottom of the rope swing, and it took chunks of flesh out of her leg. Later we found out that the dude was just a guy who lived nearby, and although it was a creepy drunk, he was totally harmless. There was a up probably inbred family that lived up the road that he would warn people about. About 5 years later, last year, they beat up some kid with a log and then kidnapped some girl at gunpoint and took her on a joyride. Number 5. When I was about 10, me and my family of 6 lived in an extremely small apartment. 2-bedroom upstairs and then the living room. When I was tired of my siblings, I would sleep downstairs. One night I'm lying on the couch facing the front door and watching the sky through the window by the door when a face shows up in the window illuminated by a lighter. I'm pretty relieved, thinking it was maybe one of our druggy neighbors seeing if my parents were still awake when it showed up again. I try to scream, but when I do, nothing comes out, not a sound. The person then kicks in the door and walks in the room. He sees me, smiles, goes towards the kitchen. As he comes out of the kitchen with a knife, my dad makes it down the stairs and the guy books it out of there. I can't sleep easily on couches to this day. Number 4. I was 6 or 7 years old in my parents' apartment and heading towards the kitchen. So I go towards the kitchen where my mom is talking on the phone. At the end of the corridor in front of me, I see the front door opening and halting because of the door chain holding it. I thought it was my dad. It was about 11 in the morning. So I think my dad will close the door and ring the doorbell for my mom to open up the chain. It was weird because I hadn't heard the key turning, except that nobody rings the door and an enormous hairy hand that definitely doesn't belong to my father tries to pull on the chain. Immediately, I understand it's a burglar. I rush to slam shut the door with my entire body while I whine a little no. So there's me slamming against the door with all my 7-year-old strength, panicked out of my mind, and then putting all my weight against the infernal piece of wood, with a huge burglar on the other side trying to keep the door open so he can pull the chain off. Fingers trying to grasp the end of the chain, and my mother completely oblivious about 12 feet away in the next room. I tried to scream at my mother. I remember yelling muffled pieces of "Mom, Mom," but she thinks I'm horsing around and pays no attention. It's after my 7th or 8th scream when I was about to give up all hope when I heard my mom that she'll call her back because I've done something and she needed to check on me. The burglar heard her and let me close the door. My mom arrives and demands to know what I'm doing. I'm crying at that point, not being able to utter a coherent sentence, trying to point at the door saying only "burglar out" or something to that effect. My mother, not getting the hint, comes over and tries to open the door to see what the fuss is all about, with me still pushing against it. As soon as I realized what she was about to do, I tried to push her away, crying, sobbing at her, "Don't open the door, there's a burglar outside." I had to fall on my ass, then on my knees, and beg her against trying to push me aside before she decided to change her mind and see through the peephole instead of opening the door. So she looks through it in a hurry and starts saying, "See, there's no one and I see her very annoyed face turning pale as a sheet all of a sudden. She grabs me and pushes me aside from the door and tells me to go get her phone. I rush to the kitchen. I heard her yell through the door, "I can see you crouching, you're behind the door. I'm not gonna open, and I'm calling the police right this minute." The bastard was still behind the door, crouching as low as he could, not making a sound, so my mom would think no one was outside as she opened the door and he'd rush inside. My mom called the police, and after 5 minutes of my mom issuing threats through the door, we heard someone creeping away from the hallway and down the building entrance and outside the building door. My mom was white as a sheet, not making a sound or expressing any emotion throughout the whole ordeal. After about half an hour later, my father arrived, oblivious to the whole thing. When my mom told him about what happened, he went and got a new lock and a better door chain. The police arrived that afternoon, a full 5 hours later. Even though the police station is a 10-minute drive from our house, I don't think the burglar was ever caught. Number 3. My mom had been calling a lot. It was my first semester away at college, and her husband had gone bad insane. He hit her for the first time 4 nights before I moved out. She locked him out of the house and he banged on the doors. In the middle of the night, he had driven away and hadn't seen him since. When I answered, she said she had gotten a phone call while she was watching TV. The person on the other end of the line said he had been hired to kill her and her kids, but if she could make him a better offer, he wouldn't do it. He told her what TV show she was watching. He told her what dorm I lived in. He told her that my brother was upstairs playing video games when he was supposed to be asleep. She ran upstairs. My little brother was playing video games in his room. She yelled at him to pack a bag. The person on the phone had hung up. She called me. I waited for 45 minutes before leaving, hoping my roommates would show up and help me figure out what to do. I said I'd call the police, but my mom said no. She said please come help her. My roommates didn't come home. The RA was gone. I got into my truck and made a 45-minute drive in 20 minutes. The highway was nearly deserted. I hoped a police officer would pull me over. They'd know what to do and I'd be able to say I hadn't called the cops. I accidentally missed my turn when my mother called me 3 times in a row. I accidentally ran a red light when I answered. A cop was right there. He didn't pull me over. When I got to our neighborhood, I parked 2 streets away and used my ROTC tactical movements to go through the alleys to our backyard. I tried to call my mother 3 times, but she didn't answer. I put my phone on vibrate. The gate was closed, but when I opened it, I saw a back door standing open. No one was out there. I hesitated and went in, calling out softly for our dogs. They weren't there. Those dogs bark at everything. They were either not in the house or they were dead. I got a knife from the kitchen and started a room-by-room search. Kitchen and laundry room were clear. I refused to check the garage. Dining room clear. Living room clear. But oh f***, there's a broken vase. Downstairs bathroom clear. I didn't go into the master bedroom because I fully expected to find my mother dead. I needed to get upstairs to the second bedroom on the right, my bedroom, to get my rifle, the only gun in the house, but no one was downstairs and the upstairs was completely dark. There was a blind corner right at the top of the stairs. Anyone could be hiding there. I was 100% freaking the out as I climbed the stairs. I got almost halfway up when someone started banging on the front door, which is right in front of the stairs. I froze. I turned halfway so no one could surprise me from the second floor. "Who's there?" I screamed. My cover was blown anyway. If anyone was in the house, they knew I was there. Whoever was outside could see me through the glass at the top of the door, but it was too dark for me to see them. No one answered, but they kept pounding on the door. "Who the f*** is it?" I screamed. Now at the base of the steps, they kept banging on the door. "I'll kill you, mother f***er," I screamed as I flung open the door to see my mother standing there with the dogs in her arms. "Why didn't you answer?" I asked. She said she wasn't sure if it was me or not. And if it hadn't been me, what were you gonna do? Throw the dogs at them? She hadn't thought that far ahead. I told her the back door had been open, but she said it'd been locked when she left. I said I checked most of the downstairs and was going upstairs for the gun. She said go up and get it, so I went up with my knife and checked the upstairs while I was at it. Then I checked the rest of the downstairs. She had taken my brother to a friend's house, which is why she hadn't answered the phone when I called. She'd been driving. I spent the night barricading the doors and windows and begging her to leave. Just leave. She baked me some cookies. Her face was blue and purple from her husband's last visit. She said my brother had tried to protect her and he didn't look so great either. I said I'd kill her husband. She said she knew and so did he, which is why he left when they called me. I feel like I should mention I'm a chick and he was a good foot taller than me and easily 50 pounds heavier, but I would have killed him. In the morning I had to leave early to be at PT for ROTC at 5:30 a.m. I had maybe 45 minutes of sleep where my mom had asked me to stay on the living room floor outside the master bedroom. I lost it at PT and then again in my weekly meeting with my athletics advisor. My ROTC instructors and my athletic advisor were horrified. We got a restraining order that day against my mom's husband. He couldn't come on campus. I wasn't allowed to walk on campus alone. My roommates got extra security. A few weeks later, my mom's husband tried to kill her on my 19th birthday. He was in his car and he'd thrown her a phone, which she was using to dial 911 on the passenger seat. She'd reached in to get it and he grabbed her arm and held her while he reversed out of the driveway and dragged her down the alley. He let go and her head slammed against the ground. She had a concussion. He tried to back over her, but she screamed and rolled away. He ran over her foot and hand. Our neighbor came out of the house and screamed, which scared him away. My mother and brother went into hiding that night. Being on those stairs, certain my family was dead and I was also about to die, was the scariest moment of my life. And having someone bang on the door and not answer when I'm screaming at them, having to open it and thinking it was a killer on the other side. Creepiest thing ever. Number 2. I was born and raised in North Dakota. Back high school, a group of us would research murders that occurred out in the country. We would then go out and find the scenes and film the exploration at night. This was about 2 years before the Blair Witch. It was something to do while we got wasted on shitty beer and teenage bullshit. Eventually we ran out of places to go and got really good at finding abandoned rural farmsteads by driving dirt roads and looking for the signs. Rut roads, deliberate tree groves, and old mailbox posts were common markers. We were out looking when we spotted a tree grove that was out of place and drove through the field and discovered an old house. It had padlocks on the outside doors that were knocked off pretty easily. We dispatched of them and entered the kitchen. There were 6 of us, all with flashlights, and we lit up the kitchen dining area fairly easy. The table was the initial thing you noticed, and it was strange because of how normal it looked. It was set for a meal and not a bowl was out of place. Only thing was, we'd been in dozens of these houses and place settings were a first, especially on broken ones. As we investigated the area, we found the fridge had the disgusting remnants of a full stock and the cupboards were full of canned and dry foods. This was also a first. One guy found mail on the counter from early June 1978, and the other found a creepy-ass TV guide in the living room with UFOs on the cover. All the family photos were hanging up. Mom, dad, bro, and sis in their 1970s glory. Furniture was dusty but in good condition. Closets were full. Everything was totally normal, which was super abnormal. As we dug around the house, we started to realize that the house had not been moved out of. It has been straight up abandoned. Imagine locking the door to your house and never coming back. That's the state this house was in. Complete unplanned departure. We went upstairs and split into 3 pairs to check out the 3 rooms. Ours was the closest.
Oh, you know they're white. You go upstairs in a strange house with the Blair Witch Project and crazy bullshit in the forest. The first thing you do is split up. Come on, baby. These motherfuckers ain't never seen The Grudge. You'll never part ways from the homies.
And obviously it was the younger boy's room. I can't describe what it looked like too well because almost right away from the hall we heard the most terrifying scream I had ever had the misfortune of hearing. We went running into the hallway and we were all yelling questions at each other at the same time. After a few seconds, the 2 screamers caught their breath and said, "You have to go in and see." Walking down the hall and through the doorway, I prayed I wouldn't act like a in front of my friends. I shouldn't have been concerned because the others were just as scared as I was. The room itself opened to the left of the door frame, and centered on the right side of the room was a queenish sized bed. Propped up on pillows with all the blankets drawn to the waist, arms on the top of the blanket, and worst of all, head turned slightly so it was looking at you straight in the eyes when you entered the room, was a life-size porcelain doll. Snow white skin, jet black hair, cold dead eyes. The dead eyes lit up with our flashlights, like she was waiting for us. If the head hadn't been turned, I could excuse it, but it was turned. Ready for when we walked in. Ready for 20 years. Hasty exits were made as we moved down the stairs and got into the car. It was during the ride we started to get even more creeped out when we realized that even though the house had been abandoned, someone had taken the time to set up that goddamn doll. Not packing food, clothes, or family photos, setting up the doll was one of the last things done in this house. We researched their names but got nothing. No tragic car accident, no grisly massacre, no extended family, just a tacky time capsule in the middle of nowhere. We found out that the county had taken possession of the land for non-payment of taxes, explaining the locks, but never tracked down any more information on what happened to them, or why they left that doll. Number 1. A few years back I rented an apartment from a friend of mine. He had recently bought it and had it completely renovated. He put it up for sale but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it in the meantime. After moving in, I realized that there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was about 45 but looked much older. She would sit up all night listening to Christian radio shows and talking loudly to someone. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep, so I went over to her place and asked her to keep it down. She opened the door and I got a quick peek. Her walls had crosses painted all over them in different colors, and words like Jesus and angel scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted black, letting no light in at all. It was damp, yellow-stained 50-year-old carpets, dog shit and cockroaches everywhere. No dog though. I asked her to keep it down. She just looked at me and shut the door, then she turned up the radio even louder. The next night I had my girlfriend staying over. I wake up in the middle of the night and see a shadow of a person next to the bed looking at us sleeping. I think I'm hallucinating this, as I usually do in the dark when I'm sleepy, but then the shadow starts talking. It's my neighbor and she's holding something in her hand. She broke in during the night and who knows how long she stood there. "You should lock your doors at night," she said. The next morning I hear someone making strange noises below my bedroom window. It's my neighbor talking to herself in tongue. She has a plastic bag in her hand with a rotting dead dog inside. It's hot as hell outside and I can smell death from the bag. At this point I'm scared shitless. She's obviously very insane. I go upstairs and knock on another person's door and ask what the hell is going on. The guy's just as scared as me. Apparently she broke into the apartment one evening as well while he was watching TV with his kids. He got up from the couch to get a snack only to find her behind the couch staring at him holding a power drill. Now I know what was in her hand. At this stage I'm basically pooping myself. I call the cops and they know about her. Apparently she is a violent schizophrenic and she hasn't taken her meds, but they can't force her or enter her apartment without her permission because she owns it. The only thing they can do is get her when she goes outside. I sit up for the next 2 days waiting for her to run out of cigarettes. When I hear her leave at 2 a.m. to go across the road to the 7-Eleven, I call the cops. They have 3 cars in a special van over in less than 2 minutes. They restrain her, throw her in the van, and drive off to some institution. And in less than a minute, it's like she was never there. I never see her again. Still have nightmares about her looking at me in my sleep.
Dude, whoo! Woo! See, Cedric the Entertainer. If you guys ever seen the original Kings of Comedy, man, he has this bit that he tells. It's like, most people live by this whole, creed. I hope nothing goes bad. You know what I mean? Like, man, we people who are used to living in unsavory areas, we have a whole different creed. It's called I wish. I wish a motherfucker would have the gall, the brass, to be in my apartment unannounced with a weapon and have the nerve not to have used it on me already. Oh man, they getting beaten up and teabagged. It's going down. Man, oh my God, that last story though, dude. Man, that chick better had not had no plans for the rest of anything else, because she got taken out that night. Damn that. Damn that. But yo, hope you guys enjoyed the video, man. This is becoming one of my favorite channels. No bullshit, man. I'm gonna subscribe to this dude. You know, hit the link down below. Go watch the original video, man. This guy probably makes some of the most entertaining top 10, top 15, top 20 videos on YouTube to me right now, other than Matthew Santaro. It's your boy BHD. Yo, Twisms.